Hey folks, David Stewart here. COVID baby, that is the title of this video. Talking a little bit about my daughter. My wife came up with this term and said, she's a COVID baby because we had taken this trip recently to Texas, and of course, traveling, we ate at lots of restaurants. And eating at the restaurants, my daughter really did not have a very, very fun time sitting in a high chair and being bored out of her mind. She's used to eating at home and getting out of her little high chair, getting out away from the table when she's done eating, not having to sit at a restaurant and listen to adults talk about things that she doesn't understand about. So yeah, there were times where we turned on like a baby show or something and gave her a phone. Now, go back in time, a couple years with our son never had screen time at a restaurant. He never looked at a phone. We might bring a bag of toys for him to play with if he got bored, but he never looked at a phone, and we were very proud of that our son didn't need to spend time with screens and parents were giving their kids phones. And this whole thing kind of flipped that perspective around and made me think a little bit deeper. My wife called her COVID baby because the entire last year we hadn't been to any restaurants. We never took our daughter to a restaurant, never took her to the supermarket, at least for months after the pandemic. I went basically alone to the supermarket and bought groceries for myself, and also bought groceries for extended family members that really should not get coronavirus. And anyway, so she's never been to restaurants. She doesn't know how to behave in a restaurant. She doesn't know how to behave in the supermarket. I take her to the supermarket. She has a very hard time as a 2-year-old walking beside me, staying close to me, not pulling things off of shelves, or sitting in the cart for a few minutes while we roll around and throw things into the cart. All of those things are really hard for her to handle. Now, my son, when he was 2, he could handle those things. Why? Because he'd been doing them since really before he was 1. I'd been taking him to the market or Home Depot or wherever we're going, and he was able to sit in a cart or walk beside me and do those things. He was behaviorally trained to do them. So, yeah, she's a COVID baby. She doesn't know how to act in all of these weird modern situations. But of course, it made me think a couple layers deeper than that, which is really that the restaurant experience and the supermarket experience and many of the things that we subject children to are not normal or natural, especially if you look at the entirety of human history. It's really not normal to take your children, put them in a little plastic cart, roll around inside of a giant building and just put food into that basket, which you then exchange, not even for a physical object. You swipe a card. This stuff is not normal. Throughout human history, you didn't buy and sell goods that way. You went to a store to get what you couldn't make yourself, or if you go further back, if you want to imagine medieval peasants, they grew their own food. They maintained their own food supply. The most that you might do is buy meat from the butcher, because, obviously you're not going to be slaughtering a cow for yourself every single week. So you'd buy meat from the butcher, and otherwise you'd grow most things, or you might trade for your neighbors. You were never taking the kids and throwing them in a plastic cart and spending 30 minutes or an hour going up and down aisles that are just full of food prepackaged for you to throw in the cart and eat. That's not normal. It's really not normal to go to a building where they serve food, sit down and wait to sit at a table and then have fresh made food made exactly the way that you want it to, just delivered to you in exchange for money while you sit there and talk and eat. The restaurant experience historically is really anomalous. So none of the things that we're subjecting children to are really normal. So keeping that in mind, of course, it was really unreasonable to expect my daughter to have a set of behaviors that would make her well adjusted to normal things. It's the same thing if somebody's like, my kids don't ever need to look at an iPad when they're in the car. It's it's not normal for children to be strapped into a 5-point harness in a little seat and be driven 30, 40, several hours at a time from one place to another. There's actually nothing normal about that experience, especially for a child. Throughout history, children got up, they moved, they played, they did things all day. Sitting still is not something children are well designed to do. You think about, just extend that into the next realm, like public school. What exactly is normal about taking a kid and putting a backpack on him, saying, get on that bus and sit in a seat? Bus drives to school, get off the bus, wait in line, orderly wait in line with the other children, go in, sit at your cubicle, your little desk, in your little box and then get out and do the tasks that an adult tells you to do for 6 hours. Oh, you get a couple breaks. You get 15 minutes to go out and play. And then you get to eat lunch, and then you get maybe another 20 minutes to go out and play. Maybe you have a supplemental lesson like PE where you get to go out and do an organized game where they tell you what to do. None of these things are normal for children. So when people are like, I can't believe the dystopia we're in, where kids have to log on to their classroom with the computer, or they have to go to school and then there's like a plastic bubble around them. It's like, it was already dystopian and weird. There's nothing normal about the school experience at all historically. People on a, on the level of humanity, we're not designed for that. This is behavior that has to be hammered into children. It's learned behavior that happens over the course of years. In fact, that's what socialization actually means when you dig down to it. When people talk about socialization in public school, they're not talking about socializing. They're not talking about learning social behaviors with their peers. That happens in the 30 minutes of recess they get every day, but rather it is to learn to adhere to institutional norms, basically to be able to line up in an orderly fashion, do what an authority figure tells you to do, and operate as a little worker bee, so that and people will say, well, it's very important for them to have a job. So when they go out in the job market, they go to an employer and they do the same thing they did in school. Wake up at a certain time, get to the factory at a certain time, work on their feet or work in their little workstation for a certain number of hours, get paid a certain amount of money for the amount of hours they worked, and then they're released from their servitude to go home. This isn't really normal. A medieval peasant was far more free than a modern man in many respects, as far as his ability to do what he chose during a day. Now, life was perilous in other ways. I don't want to say it was better in the medieval period, but he certainly had a very different feeling to his life as far as how he mastered his space and what he did, how he woke, how he slept, what he did with other people, how he treated his children. Those things were very, very different. It's modernity itself that is strange, and it is not kids that are the problem. So think about this with like homeschool. You hear this from people. Homeschool kids are weird. I meet weird homeschool kids. Why is a homeschool kid weird? Oh, well, he didn't get in line with everybody else. Getting in line is not normal behavior. Oh, well, he didn't, he talked to a kid who was 3 years older than him like it was his friend. Why is that not normal? In a normal world, you're talking to, my son talks to lots of kids that are outside of his age because everyone's outside of his age in a clan environment. Why would it be so weird to talk to somebody who's 2 years older than you, or to talk to a younger kid and teach him? That's normal. It's normal to talk outside your age group. It's abnormal for kids to only be with people that are within the same year of age of them. That's what's abnormal. So you think about this, once your perspective is switched around, you realize that it's modernity that's weird. And all the behaviors that people think of as normal are behaviors that are pounded into you really against your nature, and certainly against what has been true throughout history. You realize that it's modern man that is abnormal. That's what the bug man is. He's been trained to be something that is really kind of in opposition to his nature. So if you think about this person's weird or that person's weird, stop and think, would they be weird? How weird would they be in 17th century rural America or rural England? Probably not weird. They'd probably be normal. In which case, they're the normal ones and you are the weird one. And it reminds me of this quote by St. Anthony the Great, one of the Desert Fathers, and in a lot of cases considered the father of aesthetic monasticism. And he said, "A time is coming when all the world will go mad, and they will say to you, 'You are mad because you are not like us.'" And that's really where we're at. People are weird because they act normal, because they act in a sane way rather than acting in an insane way. So if you think about all the little walls we put around children especially, that persist into adulthood, it took me so many years to unlearn the things I learned in school, which you just kind of learn by rote. This is the way that you act. You have to do things this way. Breaking out of that box and learning to say, be your own boss, have your own business, think your own thoughts, operate in your own way, challenge the edicts of society. All those things have to happen outside of the institutional environment. It's the institution that's designed to turn a normal person into really an abnormal person. in a lot of cases against their nature. And I think about this as a teacher because I had so many kids that were like, this kid has ADHD. I'm like, this kid is not atypical. He's a normal kid. He just is resisting sitting in one place for 6. What makes you think a 7-year-old should be able to sit in a seat for 6 hours a day? That's not normal. Historically, we never asked 7-year-olds to do that in the past. So why is why is he weird because he's not adhering to modern behavior standards? He wouldn't be weird in the 17th century, 16th century. He'd be normal. So I think about this when I think about my kids as a teacher. Everybody's different. Everybody's got their own thing. Everybody has different desires and unique abilities. One of the big ones I figured out is that if kids are involved in an activity that they want to do, you'll find that they're quite happy to do it. That's why they say their favorite subject is recess, because that's fun. You have to think a little bit outside the box about what is normal and what is abnormal about child behavior and our learned behaviors in particular. So anyway, starts with that idea of the COVID baby. Of course, my daughter doesn't know how to act in restaurants. She hasn't been in restaurants. We haven't trained her to interact with these modern institutions in the correct way, in the appropriate way. So of course, she's not going to do it. And at the same time, definitely reserving a lot of judgment whenever I see parents that are like, this kid's got a video game or a tablet or something on, sitting around at the airport. Of course, it's not normal to sit around and wait for 2 hours for something for children. That's completely abnormal. So is it really so bad that they give them something to entertain them? I'm reserving judgment on a lot of that stuff from this point on. So thanks so much for watching this little, I don't know what it is, a rant. Don't forget to join my mailing list at dbspress.com. I should have more news coming down the pipeline with some Amazon Vela, which I will probably talk about in a separate video and stuff. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time.